Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Frazer Grudgings, who's one of our senior consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today, Frazer and I are going to be discussing the sort of common pitfalls that he sees companies make when they're implementing ISO 27001. So Frazer, first question for you, pretty obvious one, is what are these common pitfalls that companies are making?
Sure. Hi, Annie. So there's several, and there's probably a lot that we've not yet encountered because every situation is different. You know, every business is different. But generally speaking, it's businesses kind of have a lack of top management, senior management commitment, and that can sometimes be born out of the requirement to get certification. It could be that there's pressure to achieve it, to remain in a position to tender for possible work, bids and things like that. And often it's missed that the top management really do need to buy into the certification, buy into the implementation of a management system, and apply their support, their knowledge and their backing in that respect, rather than it becoming a what's called a tick box exercise in that respect, because it doesn't have a lot of longevity. You know, you need that commitment at the top level. Another common pitfall is businesses tend to focus too much on the documentation, because when you're first starting out on the implementation process, it can feel quite daunting. You can feel swamped because there is, certainly from an information security perspective, there's the ISO standard itself to sort of get your head around, and you know, the different clauses. But then there's also the Annex A controls, which within the 2022 version, you know, there's 93. So you can feel a little bit, where do I begin? A lot of businesses think they need to create documentation for every single clause, every single control, and they lose a lot of time in doing that and lose focus. So that's often what we see. Similarly, trying to implement everything at once, you know, trying to launch new management systems, training and awareness campaigns, objectives, you know, lots of different activity. You know, it sounds logical when you talk it now, but you really do need to pace those things out and set them out and sort of set priorities in that respect. So a lot of businesses do get a bit swamped by everything in terms of documentation and trying to do too much too soon in that respect. And then that feeds into not giving yourself enough time to actually appreciate, you know, why you want the management system, why do you need the certification, how will it evolve, who will be responsible for it. And again, that can be that, you know, businesses feel rushed because they're trying to appease a requirement in terms of we need certification to be able to bid for particular work or remain on a supplier approval list. So it's pacing yourself in that respect and appreciating that it is a big task, and it can be broken down and done at different stages. And I guess the sort of final most common thing, you know, that certainly I've seen is businesses have not established what their risk process is, their risk methodology. And if you bear in mind that all the ISO standards now are risk focused, that can be problematic if you're not necessarily aware of what risks are associated to your business, particularly from an information security perspective, because you then can't marry what is the management system trying to achieve, what is it trying to help in terms of protect your information. And you know, the aim is it's there to help you reduce those risks or avoid those risks. So it's quite key that you focus on those in the early stages in that respect.
What does a company need to do, and what do they need to focus on to avoid these common pitfalls?
So if we look at the top management commitment, it's try and sort of push back if you can, if you're the person that's been asked to implement information security management system or achieve the certification, and try and get some common ground as to why do we need this as a business, and get the support of leadership so that they then can justify, when they talk to external auditors when it comes to certification time, they can confidently say why they need that. And if you can link that to the risk assessment and the risk methodology, that will probably work in terms of senior leadership, because they will understand risk, they'll understand business risk. They focus on these things day in, day out. It's the kind of things that they're going to discuss. They can then associate, okay, it's not just something that we're trying to achieve because we're being forced to by, whatever supplier approval process. This is something that we need within our business. We believe it's going to add value. It's going to help us mature in that respect, and it will help us appreciate and understand and mitigate particular risks. So certainly get that buy-in and that understanding from top management to begin with. Secondly, when it comes to focusing on too much or too much documentation, you don't have to create documentation for every single control that there are. So when I first was introduced to running an ISMS, I fell into that trap that, we need a control policy for every single control. And I was like, how are we going to achieve that? Because there was 114 on the previous version. It's now 93, but it's still a lot. So the way to approach that is look at it from a risk perspective and your priorities. So you can approach that, what elements of these controls does everybody in the business need to be aware of? So things like how businesses want their own devices and technology to be used, so the acceptable use of that kind of thing, the information security policy itself and the objectives. They're things that you might want to focus on initially, and then you can set yourself, second, third priorities to implement further controls that are more subject matter expert related. So perhaps more something that you could work with over time with the IT department or your development and software team in that respect. So not everything has to be done at the first stage. You can create an implementation plan, and you can demonstrate that to auditors, to consultants that maybe helping you in terms of gap analysis, that these are your priorities. This is why they're a priority, and then you're going to focus on the next part at phase 2 of the plan, and etc. So you can spread that out in that respect. And obviously in terms of risk assessments and things like that, so businesses will probably have some idea of risk. What they may not have focused on is information security risk. So that's a case of looking at that from the point of view of things like confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and the impact that those 3 areas may have on your information security, be that assets, be that your locations and premises, or be that your people. Sometimes that's difficult to appreciate in terms of how do you figure that out in terms of business. So you may look to get training for the individuals that are responsible, or they may reach out to consultants and third parties to give support in that respect.
Just sort of following on for your last point there, where can a company that's looking to implement ISO 27001, where can they get help and support?
So obviously you can look internally within your own workforce. You could ask what kind of skills have people got, what kind of past experience. Obviously businesses have diverse employees in that respect. Somebody may have worked in a compliance function before. They may have experience of audits, internal audits. So it's always a good opportunity to sort of seek out what skills you've got, what competence you've got already. Then obviously individuals that have been identified to have the responsibility of the management system. So typically it's an information security manager, is the sort of job function that we come across. They can get training for themselves. They can go to, the big certification bodies, like BSI, LRQA, those sort of situations. That's certainly how I was introduced to it. And you can have lead auditor training, you can have implementer training. So, the ways and means of implementing the management system. But then you can also reach out to guys like us at URM as third-party consultants, where you identify that you don't have that skill or that competence within your own workforce. So you bring in that support as and when you need it, and we sort of join in and become part of their team. So we we can pick up in terms of fully implementing, the management system or the maintenance of it in terms of audits, gap analysis, etc. Or we can just play a supporting role and train and guide the individuals that are representing, for the business there. So there are many different ways, that businesses can try and approach this. So one of the key things I would just suggest is give yourself plenty of time in terms of implementation. Some businesses will say we need to do it within a month. That might help if they've got large wallets and are willing to pay for consultants and the time. Enough bodies can make these things possible, but I would say set yourself a year in that respect, and give yourself 6 months to do the building, the construction of the management system itself, certain documentation, and then 6 months to implement it, and then you can actually begin the internal audit process there, and checking that the system is right for your business and meets the requirements of the ISO standard.
Implementing it in a month does sound a little bit
that's
a little bit
challenge.
ambitious. Yeah.
It's and as I say, it's we have had challenges like that come our way, and it has been a team that's sort of had to sort of focus solely in terms of that client, and a lot of stoic work, long hours in that respect. So it's sometimes it's difficult to manage that situation, but if you have the ability and you've got the buy-in from top management, they're the things that you want to be discussing and saying, look, this is not a rush job. We're going to have to do this, do it right, because at the end of the day, you need it to add value. That's the whole point of it. As I say, it's trying your best to avoid it being a tick box exercise, because of we will not be on the list to be able to tender for that particular work, which does happen, but at the same time, it's balancing, well, do we really want to push ourselves to bid for that kind of work? Is it really in the arena that we want to be in? If so, then really you would have the grounds then to explore where it's truly valued to the business.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Frazer, for taking the time to talk to me today. So for people who want to learn a bit more about this topic, we've got a really great blog on our website, which is urmconsulting.com, and the blog's called Common Pitfalls Identified in Organisations Seeking ISO 27001 Certification. So please go and check that out, because there's a little bit more information in there that we haven't covered in this podcast today. So thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.